Okay, in this video, I'm trying to convey some information. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm going to give it a shot. I have to go through this a couple times to figure out exactly how to make this clear to people. So here you have a report. So remember, in other videos, I walked through the accounting equation and showed how to make sure that that was a properly functioning system. I did the same thing with the SFAC 6, and I did it with a little bit bigger financial report, and I did it with the proof to cover 100% of the information patterns that you would run across. So what this report, a characteristic that this report has is that it is fully proven to be correct with machine readable rules. Okay, so here's what let me try and walk you through that. So here you have the networks in the report. Okay, so each network, though, could have multiple tables. In this case, we don't. We have one table per network. But there are 7 tables or hypercubes, and there could be more than one information pattern in each hypercube, which there is. So for example, the balance sheet is made up of 2 pieces, an assets roll-up and a liabilities and equity roll-up. But when we break this down into the information components, we see that there are 9. I'm not sure exactly what to call it. I call these blocks in the application. Sometimes I call them structures. Sometimes I call them fact sets. I think they're structures. But there's 9 of these. And in the disclosure mechanics validation, here are those 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So these are not counted. So this is the balance sheet, and that's a component. It's made up of 2 other things, the assets roll-up and the liabilities and equity roll-up. This is made up of the net cash flow roll-up and the cash and cash equivalents roll forward. So I have coverage for all of these patterns. Each pattern has a set of rules that describes that information model. So here the assets roll up, it says it requires the concept assets to be the total of that roll up. Here's liabilities and equity. It requires liabilities and equity to be the total of that roll up. And when the application loads, it tries to find that, and it reaches a conclusion as to whether it's this component or this block or structure is following the rules that are prescribed for that structure. Okay? And basically, every one of these was found, and every one is consistent with what is expected. So there are no text blocks. I'm not doing text blocks in this case. So from a reporting checklist or the disclosure rules, there are also 9 pieces. So it's a little harder to see. I have to fix this. But basically, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a combination of these two, so we're not going to count that. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they're the same 9. And there are rules that indicate when these are supposed to be in the report. So this document information is always required. It found it, so it's consistent with expectation. Entity information, the same thing. It's always required. Okay, so this is a balance sheet. This is saying that this is always required. It's satisfied because it found the assets roll up and the liabilities and equity roll up. So here are those two pieces. This share capital by class disclosure is required because the line item common stock was reported. Same thing with this disclosure. The property, plant, and equipment subclassifications are required because property, plant, and equipment was reported on the balance sheet. So again, what's happening is that the entire report is being watched over by these rules, and the report satisfy all these disclosure rules. The mechanics of each disclosure are also consistent with expectations. Okay? So this has no mathematical relations. It's just a set of facts. Same here. This has mathematical relations, and you can see because of the green, they are being satisfied. Same with the liabilities and equity. Everything is green, where you'd expect a relation. If it was orange, it would mean that there's an inconsistency. Here, I'm going to take this and make it easier to read. You see there's a mathematical relation that adds up these two classes of stock, and that's consistent with what is expected. So that mathematical relation is correct. All the roll-ups of the income statement are correct. The roll forward of cash and cash equivalents is correct. The roll up of net cash flow is correct. And the roll up of property, plant, and equipment subclassifications are correct. So all the mathematical rules are correct. In addition, there are no contradictions or inconsistencies between the information structures. So here we have these fundamental accounting concept relations, and it says that all these are satisfied. What it's checking is to make sure that you're not contradicting yourself. What happens a lot is that companies do not report this total in the balance sheet, but they use this concept mistakenly to report segment long-lived assets using the U.S. GAAP taxonomy. And so there's a contradiction between a disclosure and the balance sheet, because they say one thing in the disclosure and they say something different, because we know that it's always the case that assets equals liabilities. Assets equals current assets plus non-current assets. And here we we have a rule that checks that. So it shows that there are no contradictions between these fact sets. It's saying that there are no type or class relation problems. So basically, it checks to make sure that you're not using property, plant, and equipment as a current asset, because it knows that property, plant, and equipment is a non-current asset because of rules within this taxonomy. It checks the XBRL syntax to make sure that all those rules are correct. So this is not on because I'm actually having a little problem with these rules. I took these out because there was a bug. But I know that these are all correct. This checks the relationships between all these different pieces that are used to create these structures. Sometimes what happens is someone puts a member down here and uses it as an abstract concept to hold other concepts that they report. You can't really have this reporting a value because these are typically strings. But anyway, you can take this and use it as an abstract, or if you screw these up, that's what gives this an error. And I'll just leave it at that. So, yeah, I'd give myself maybe a C for describing this at this point. I will do this a couple more times, and I'll eventually get it right. Anyway, but I'll stop there for this video. But again, the point is, everything in this report has to be checked to make sure that it is a properly functioning logical system. You can either check it manually, which you can make a lot of mistakes, or you can check it using automated machine-readable rules. But it has to be checked. Otherwise, you're going to make mistakes because there's so many details that you have to get correct. Anyway, I'll stop for now.